We acknowledge your hosts on lands of the Mississauga of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people.
We'd like to invite you to share with us 2 minutes of silence in honor of our veterans.
They fought and some died for their homeland. They fought and some died, now it's our land. Look at his little child, there's no fear in her eyes. Could he not show respect for other dads who have died? Take 2 minutes, would you mind? It's a pittance of time for the boys and the girls who went over. In peace may they rest, may we never forget why they died. It's a pittance of time. God forgive me for wanting to strike him. Give me strength so as not to be like him. My heart pounds in my breast, fingers pressed to my lips. My throat wants to fall out, my tongue barely resists. But 2 minutes I will bide. It's a pittance of time for the boys and the girls who went over. In peace may they rest, may we never forget why they died. It's a pittance of time. Read the letters and poems of the heroes at home. They have casualties, battles, and fears of their own. There's a price to be paid if you go, if you stay. Freedom's fought for and won in numerous ways. Take 2 minutes, would you mind? It's a pittance of time for the boys and the girls all over. May we never forget our young become vets at the end of life. It's a pittance of time. It takes courage to fight in your own war. It takes courage to fight someone else's war. Our peacekeepers tell of their own living hell. They bring hope to foreign lands that hate mongers can't kill. Take 2 minutes, would you mind? It's a pittance of time for the boys and the girls who go over. In peacetime our best still don battle dress and lay their lives on the line. It's a pittance of time. In peace may they rest, lest we forget why they died. Take a pittance of time.
to this year's Remembrance Day Assembly. The year 2022 marks the first time in over 7 decades that North Toronto CI joins together in Remembrance Day ceremonies under a new Canadian head of state. Queen Elizabeth II, who, with her reign of 70 years, was the longest-serving female monarch in history, was Canada's figurehead for almost half of our nation's existence.
Her absence will be reflected in our opening anthem. In this new era, Remembrance Day offers a unique opportunity to reflect on the past and unites us in the pursuit of a brighter and more prosperous future. We remind you that this is a formal assembly with no applause. At this time, we would ask that you please rise for the entry of the veterans and remain standing for the playing of God Save the King.
Good morning, staff, students, and guests, and a special welcome to Mr. Wakeland and Mr. Mulman from Foundation and our own North Toronto veterans, retired Lieutenant Colonel Michael Clarry, class of '82, and Captain John Stevens, class of '83. I would like to remind our students that this is a formal assembly, so please put away your phones, refrain from applause, and remain silent for the duration of our ceremony. Along with everyone recognized on the back of today's program, I would like to especially thank Mr. Hobson and Mr. Taylor for their efforts in organizing this assembly. Remembrance Day marks the very day that World War I ended in 1918. We wear poppies to symbolize hope after conflict. While World War I happened over 100 years ago, there is still much conflict in many parts of the world. As Canadians, we must recognize and be thankful for our freedoms and for those who continue to fight for freedoms of others, lest we forget.
Over North Toronto's proud 110-year history, many staff and students have served in the Canadian Armed Forces. Some remain on active duty today. This morning, we will honor them. Please direct your attention to the left side of the auditorium for formal introduction.
Born and raised in Toronto, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Clarry attended North Toronto from 1976 to 1982. During his time at NT, he was involved with the stage crew, the morning announcements, and the student newspaper. And as a high school student, he was active with the Royal Canadian Army Cadets. In 1982, he joined the Army Reserves. In 1983, he was accepted to the regular force under the Regular Officer Training Plan, and he completed a Bachelor of Science in Metallurgical Engineering at Queen's University. He completed training as a military engineer in 1988 and spent 20 years in the regular force with postings to various locations across Canada and in Germany. In the summer of 2003, he transferred to the reserves at 32 Combat Engineer Regiment and began law school at Queen's University, graduating in 2006. Lieutenant Colonel Clarry was the commanding officer of 32 Combat Engineer Regiment from 2011 to 2016. And in September of 2013, he was appointed as an aide-de-camp to the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario. His time as a member of the Armed Forces ended in June of this year, and he is now a Vice President of the Royal Canadian Military Institute in downtown Toronto.
Captain John Stevens was a part of the Royal Canadian Air Force. He served as a Special Operations Aircraft Commander and later went on to serve in Operation Desert Storm in the Persian Gulf War. He continued on doing service in the United Nations humanitarian operations in Bosnia, Somalia, Rwanda, and Central America, as well as serving in famine relief operations in Ethiopia. As a talented athlete, Captain Stevens contributed in getting the NTCI Junior Boys Football team to the city championship and later became the captain of the team under Coach Russell. Captain Stevens also played on NTCI's basketball and rugby teams and was a part of the BAA. Today, he serves as an esteemed captain at Air Canada, truly a remarkable person.
William Scott Rolliff was a World War II veteran, a retired director of education, a hydro consultant, an author, as well as an avid tennis player. He was very much loved by his wife Beatrice, his son Jim, and his daughter Susan. As well, he was a treasured grandpa to Aaron, Shane, and Stephanie, and a great-grandpa to Jason. His passing on April 27, 2015 was a great tragedy, especially because Rolliff made a widespread impact on his students, teachers, staff, as well as his family throughout all levels of his career and life. He was a hero, but more importantly, a family man who loved every moment he spent with his family at the cottage. He continues to be missed, and so on this important day of remembrance, let us reflect on his honorable life. May he rest in peace.
Flight Lieutenant Bud Rothschild graduated in 1938. We would like to remember him today as he was the last surviving North Toronto veteran of the Second World War. Bud loved nothing more than North Toronto. His time at the school were some of the happiest in Mr. Rothschild's life. He was an active member of NT's Camera Club and also played on our varsity senior football team. Upon graduating, Mr. Rothschild enlisted in the Canadian Air Force in 1940, where he served as a pilot for 5 years in North Africa, the North Atlantic, and Europe. Before returning home, Mr. Rothschild's plane crashed, carrying 4 other people, after it was shot down. Nevertheless, thanks to his courage and aviation skills, all 5 men survived. Mr. Rothschild passed away on January 24, 2017.
Mariel Louise R. Waters' experience as a child during the Great Depression and World War II affected her deeply. Despite earning excellent grades at North Toronto Collegiate Institute, Mariel had to leave school after grade 11. While working and inspired by the wartime exploits of the Royal Canadian Air Force, Mariel began flying lessons at age 17, under the instruction of famed aviation pioneer Marion Orr. Aspiring to become a professional pilot, she soloed 3 times and joined the RCAF Reserve, but her dream was thwarted by the overwhelming costs of lessons and the dearth of opportunities for women. Her lifetime passion for travel was ignited with a trip to Europe in 1954 as one of the first tourists to visit many sites that had been closed since World War II.
World War I and World War II pulled students and staff out of desks and chairs and into a war effort. In total, over 1,200 present and former North Toronto students answered the call to serve King and country, about the same number as we have in our entire school today. It is hard to fathom such an interruption, students as young as 16 and 17 years old left classes to enlist or to work on the home front. Recent graduates with young families or with children soon to be born joined them. Today's Legacy slideshow will introduce you once again to these stories of NT students of an earlier generation. They too were in the prime of their youth. Band members, math students, peer tutors, and soccer captains became foot soldiers, drill sergeants, marksmen, and pilots. And like you, their pride in our school, of wearing the red and gray, of singing the school song, and of carrying on the great traditions of North Toronto was held with the same meaning and passion. But unlike you and I, they left the comfortable confines of school and home to engage in a distant war. So we pause again to remember and reflect on this important part of our history, and focus on the young men and women who made it so. Let us never forget them, nor the sacrifices that they made.
I would now like to call upon North Toronto alumnus class of 1982, retired Lieutenant Colonel Michael Clarry, for some comments.
Good morning. NT does such a great job of honoring Remembrance Day. I greatly appreciate every year the opportunity to attend and say a few words. There's a lot going on in the world, and it's important to put it in context when we remember those who sacrificed their lives and their youth in conflicts over the years. When I was at NT, Remembrance Day was about the two world wars. They were the massive undertakings which mobilized Canada and cost so many Canadian lives damaged and destroyed. But conflicts have continued around the world. At first, stifled by the Cold War, and then more rampant. Many are far away and involve people we may have no connection with. But given the diversity of Canada and the level of our acceptance of immigrants from all over the world, there are some Canadians with connections to people suffering in every conflict on the planet. It's also become clear that there are more and more issues and conflicts which do or will directly affect us. What's our role then, yours and mine? A lot of the answer comes down to democracy. Because with the benefits of democracy come also the responsibilities. I'm going to offer an analogy for democracy. You can decide if it's a good analogy or a bad one. Imagine democracy as a big, solid structure with all of its levels, institutions, and complexity. And it's supported not by a few great pillars, but by a multitude of upright toothpicks. With some democracies, it may be a few million toothpicks. With others, it's hundreds of millions. All those democracies can work well, because it's not the number of toothpicks under the democracy that's important. It's the proportion of them that are helping to hold up the democracy. In case you haven't guessed, we are the toothpicks. But there are people who say, it doesn't make any difference if I vote, because my one vote is insignificant. That may be true. If one toothpick stops supporting the load, the structure won't immediately collapse. There are a lot of other toothpicks. But if fewer and fewer toothpicks are supporting the structure, then the foundation is gradually weakened and the structure becomes unsound. It's the tiny contributions of all of the individual toothpicks which make the system work. So what do the toothpicks have to do to support the load? They have to know how to provide support. What do we need to have to contribute to the support of democracy? I would say there are only two things we need: knowledge and understanding. Two simple things which we will spend the rest of our lives trying to acquire. Well, I hope you'll try. Some people don't even try to achieve them, but our lives are improved incredibly by even the attempt to acquire knowledge and understanding. Here at NT, you're learning the skills that you will use on the quest to understand the world, but you will have to make the journey. Where should you start? History. There are more than 4 letters in the word history. It's not a bad word. Though when I was here, I tried everything I could to make sure I didn't have to take history at school. My impression was that it was about memorizing names and dates, and that really didn't interest me. Now I appreciate the critical role that history plays in understanding the issues of the world, because history is not just about names and dates. It's about understanding social forces and technological changes. It's about competing ideas and motivations. It's about people's drive to make great changes and people's excuses for doing terrible things. It's about how people's ignorance or misunderstanding led to disasters. It's about the past and the present consequences of past decisions. Because many of those same motivations and excuses are at play today. By understanding their impacts in the past, we can understand their effects now. By understanding the forces pushing in our civilization, we can make intelligent decisions when we vote or interact with our government. We can be responsible and very effective toothpicks and share in the role of supporting our democracy. By learning how to intelligently contribute to the strength of our society, we are taking up the torch and holding it high. Thank you.
The story of Black and Indigenous soldiers in Canada's armed forces is a forgotten one. Yet this blank space in our collective history is a major piece missing in a puzzle of our nation's progress and development. Throughout Canada's history, Indigenous and Black soldiers contributed heavily to Canada's military successes.
Indigenous Canadians fought valiantly in Canada's armed forces, with at least 4,000 serving in the First World War. Indigenous Canadians conducted themselves with valor, with over 75 awarded decorations for bravery. Indigenous Canadians were renowned as outstanding and skilled scouts and snipers, serving at higher rates than non-Indigenous Canadians. Of the top 12 snipers in the First World War, 8 were Canadian, with many of them being Indigenous and Métis, including Francis Pegahogabo, the most successful marksman of the war. 3,000 Indigenous Canadians served valiantly in the Second World War in Dieppe, D-Day, and the Scheldt. Despite being overlooked for many awards, the exemplary service of Indigenous Canadians led to 18 being recognized with commendation for Canadian military bravery. In all, an estimated 12,000 Indigenous Canadians served in the Canadian Armed Forces throughout its history. Tragically, 500 of them lost their lives. It is our hope that the recognition of their participation and their numerous acts of courage, bravery, and skill will continue to aid the healing of the divide between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians in the building, progress, and development of our nation.
Black Canadians hold a rich and storied history in Canada's armed forces, yet one which is rarely, if ever, discussed, and one which is older than Canada itself. Black Americans escaping from slavery in the United States escaped to British North America under promise of freedom for service. Black Canadians served valiantly, defending Canada during 1812. In the Battle of Queenston Heights, they proved their mettle. 1,000 strong Black Man Canadian Company fighting valiantly in the First World War. Black Canadians served as in droves, fighting the battles of Passchendaele, Vimy Ridge, Ypres, and Hill 70. And the All-Black Nova Scotian No. 2 Construction Battalion received much commendation. The Second World War changed much. The segregated battalions of yore were done away with, replaced with integrated ones. The Black soldiers regularly faced resistance upon enlistment. Dozens of Black Canadians served in World War II, demonstrating pride and honor. Black Canadian trailblazers in all branches fought in the Netherlands, France, Belgium, and Germany. Even many Black women enlisted, bringing up the front line with women. By Korea, racist policies are being dismantled, allowing for a bold Black officer corps. of airmen, sailors, and soldiers alike. This proud trend continued into Afghanistan.
Black and Indigenous soldiers fought the odds at home to serve blindly and heroically, yet their story often gets overlooked. Hopefully, with this exposure, Remembrance Day can provide an opportunity to shine a light on all of those who serve for Canada. Thank you.
I would now like to call upon current history teacher, Ms. Wilson, to read In Flanders Fields by Canadian Colonel John McCran.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row that mark our place. And in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard but the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved, and were loved. And now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you, from failing hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
Staff, students, and honored guests. In a moment, we ask that you please rise for the performance of The Last Post, performed this year by Jacob Gordon. This will be followed by a moment of silence, the Reveille, and then O Canada. Following the national anthem, our veterans and honored guests will process down the center aisle. Please remain standing as they exit the auditorium. Please stand.
for attending today's Remembrance Day Assembly. Please return to your period 1 classes.